Welcome to the Civics Project. It's Sunday morning, what's becoming really the best part of my week, at least, and I hope yours too. So as we always say, civics is far more than government, but government is a big part of civics. So today we're going to talk with a city councilman. I'm not positive how everything works, and that's why we're doing this, but there's a mayor and 5 city council people. There may be 100 other people, but at least those are the people we know who have a vote. They have a seat at the table. And so we'll learn more about what a city councilman does and certainly what Niagara Falls is going on. That's what civics is. We want to figure out how things work. So without further ado, let me bring in John Spanbauer, who's a city councilman. And John was elected 2 years ago almost, and he's almost a senior member of the city council. I say that, I joke. But John, welcome.
Good morning, and thank you for having me, Tom.
Hey, my pleasure. So you did, one thing I will say. So I interviewed you for a newspaper article about 2 years ago now, say, and you said, hey, I like the idea of civics education, and win or lose, I want to help teach everybody about civics. And here you are, you won. You could have never called us again. You know, you're already in. So I admire that. So thank you very much for that.
Well, Tom, I'm a firm believer that in order for government to be better, we need the people in the city to be better. And I think knowledge of operations of city government is a key for our citizens to understand what's going on. And that will be one of my goals as a city council member, to try to educate our residents on city government and budget issues, personnel issues. And we have been unsuccessful at that so far. When I say I mean me because of COVID. It's related. We haven't been able to do the community meetings that I wanted to do, and hopefully the next year proves to be more productive in that aspect.
Well, you know, before we take any questions, let me just go through how it happens, because you never were in office before. You never ran for anything before. And about 2 years ago, because it's right about petition time now, what's going through your head? How did you start to do this 2 years ago?
Well, here's what I could tell you. I actually got into this position, believe it or not, for my love of golf. And I retired from Niagara University after a 31-year career at Niagara as a full-time administrator there, retired. So I started golfing that summer a lot. And the Niagara Falls golf course, the Hyde Park golf course, was in terrible condition. And the city made some cutbacks, so they didn't have the staff out there. So I started going to city council meetings to complain about the condition of the golf course. As I went to the city council meetings, it was really the first time ever of me, a resident of Niagara Falls for all my life, going to city council meetings. And I started following some of the issues, and I was very disappointed in some of the issues on how the council voted. And I was starting to get frustrated as a taxpayer and as a citizen of Niagara Falls. And it was 2 years ago in February. I was actually sitting having a beer with my brother James, who's been an administrator in Niagara Falls School District for years. He knows more about politics than I did. He goes, John, you have the time now. If you're frustrated, you should run for city council. Not knowing anything about how to run, I called the Board of Elections, registered Republican all my life just because of the fact that my parents told me to register that at 18. And I wanted to run as an independent because I just wanted to keep the parties out of it. I've always voted for whoever I thought was the best person and not the political line. When I called the Board of Elections, I talked to a representative there, and they said, well, you can't run as an independent. It's too late to register. You have to run as a Republican, and you need to meet with Bill Carroll, the head of the Republican Party. So I met with Bill Carroll, the head of the Republican Party. I said, okay, how do I go about this? After him explaining it to me, after about a week of thinking, I said, you know what, I'm going to throw my hat into this ring. And I did. And I was fortunate enough to win. It was a lot of hard work. And it's what I thought it would be. I mean, I don't think there's any major surprises. If anything, I think I've been less productive than I thought I could be to help the city of Niagara Falls. You know,
why do you think you were less productive?
You know, when I look at it, I think I was a community advocate before. And when I say that, volunteering time to different community groups, helping people that are less fortunate than myself, you're not doing that as much. Your time is spent, my time is spent doing research about other cities, doing research about why we've come to where we're at, And I'm a firm believer you have to study the past to make sure the future is better. And in my first year, that's what I've done. I've studied, I've looked at what we've done in the past. I've looked at past voting. I've used many of the state resources to compare ourselves against other cities our size. In the private industry, and I'm not sure other people have done this in Niagara Falls as our city council people. I came from a private industry, and what we did at Niagara University, if there was another school successful, let's say Canisius, enrollment goes up 30%. Well, the first thing we do is say, what's Canisius doing right to get that enrollment up? And we benchmark against other schools. I'm not sure we've done that in the city of Niagara Falls. So I'm a firm believer in benchmarking and looking at numbers of comparable cities. And the New York State Comptroller's office basically uses the city of Utica, Troy, New York, Binghamton as the comparable cities to Niagara Falls when they're doing data. And I've compared those cities, and I've looked at how we have responded to the economy, loss of industry. Other cities have done a better job than us in recovering, and other cities have done a better job than us with their budgets, and data shows that. So I've done a lot of research with that, and it's not like I'm feet on the ground out in the community as much. It's more work and history and trying to learn the operations of the city.
You know, you're describing some great stuff, and it needs to be done. But sometimes, you know, my real job is, what do you really have to do to become a city councilman before you can even study budgets? I mean, studying budgets is great, but can you get elected just knowing about budgets, or do you have to do something different? Do you have to?
No, well, here's what I can tell you. We are in a very unique situation in the city of Niagara Falls right now with our city council. So we have 2 members of the city council that are leaving. Actually 3. One is just Annie Tuma, who did a great job on our city council, is looking to pursue a degree in education as administrator in Niagara Falls School District. So he resigned recently. His replacement is Frank Soda, a former city council person. And I think Frank's going to bring a lot of experience to the city council. But the bottom line is, to answer your question, I've sat down with every candidate that's running for office except for one. And what I've done is I've shared my experience with them. And my experience goes back to not knowing how to do a campaign budget, not knowing the work and the hard work you have to do to go door to door, and the people that slam the door on your face, the people that don't want to hear about you. I thought that was the hardest thing to do as a politician, going out and getting petitions. It discouraged you. Yeah, some people love going door to door. I got to be honest with you. I enjoyed meeting some people, but when you knock on a door in the middle of March or you're disturbing dinner and you're asking people to listen to you, and you feel like all you're doing is disturbing them, and you feel like you're begging them to vote for you. And I had issues with that. I thought about dropping out a couple of times because it just wasn't my cup of tea, working and going door to door. And not that I didn't have a work ethic, I just thought I was bothering people. So that was the toughest thing. And I've told that to the candidates that are running for city council, that's one of those things that you know, it wasn't something I expected, you know, and it was hard.
Yeah. You know, one of the things I notice about you and that I admire about you is that it doesn't look like your blood pressure ever gets above 50. You know, your heart beats per minute. You are calm. I throw things against the wall. I get passionate. I scream and yell. We get to the same place. But, you know, what's it like? You know, you've been there 2 years, which is nothing. But you've been there 2 years, which is everything. Well,
14 months.
You know, how long does it take before major impacts can happen being a city council person? Maybe a decade, maybe a week. Can you do anything tomorrow? You know, how long does it take to make change?
Well, a couple things. I think you can make. So we had a couple votes that I think are important votes for the future of the city of Niagara Falls. And I'll explain both of them. First of all, let me step back. When you say I look very calm, believe me, I qualified for the COVID shot because of my high blood pressure.
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, I think you should let it out. You're keeping all that in is going to hurt. You know.
And here's what I can tell you: when we were putting our budget together for 2021, where we were down about $5 million in revenue, when the state was cutting us back funds and we were looking at cutting jobs. I didn't sleep at night. It was a very difficult time. So I get very emotional about the city and doing things. I may look calm, but believe me, it gets me. It gets me.
The 2 votes?
Pardon
There were 2
me?
votes you thought. You thought 2 votes.
So what happens? One of the main things that came to, are you familiar with the short-term rental business?
Only as a user, but
Okay, so Niagara Falls is becoming a huge short-term rental business. Okay, so when our administration got in, the mayor decided, let's look at this business. One of the problems that we don't do in the city of Niagara Falls is Tom Christie runs a beautiful short-term business, follows all the rules and regulations he's supposed to, but then John Spanbauer opens a short-term rental business, but doesn't register with the city. I run my own house. We run it illegally, but I'm still making a profit on that house. And I'm not running a great business. The short-term rental business has been huge in Niagara Falls. So what has happened is we started looking at it, and the mayor came in and said, you know what? Let's do what some other communities do. And we're going to regulate the short-term rental business to a district. And the district the mayor picked was basically from Whirlpool Street down to DeVoe Park, all the way up to Buffalo Avenue and down to like 19th and Walnut. That's just a general. And we were going to allow short-term rentals only into that area. There's an organization that was a lobby group for short-term rentals that said, no, you can't limit to where we go. And it was a very heated discussion. The planning board of the city of Niagara Falls voted the plan down that the mayor proposed. I did my research. The county voted it down what the mayor proposed. In order to pass this, we needed a 5-0 vote. Basically, the council voted 4-1 to pass this resolution and ordinance. I really believe my thoughts to support it. It could have changed the fabric of downtown Niagara Falls. And let me step back and say, so during this process, we put a moratorium on short-term rentals. No one could get a short-term rental. When we took the moratorium off, we've passed 63 short-term rental basically licenses since we passed. So that's 63 homes in Niagara Falls, New York that are going to be turned into a short-term rental. Tom, that home could be next to you in a beautiful neighborhood. And the argument is it's going to improve the neighborhood. It does, because most people who get into short-term rental business, they improve the house. But if we had it and we passed it, and this is my belief, if everything was geared downtown Niagara Falls, now we create density in downtown Niagara Falls. Some of those blighted areas turn into a short-term rental area, just as they do in Niagara Falls, Canada. Went through the same thing in 2017. They voted to create a downtown area for their short-term rental business. So that was a vote that I think could have changed the way we worked. It was voted down. We had one councilman that basically didn't like the plan and voted it down, and basically it's back on the planning stage right now. So the short-term rental business is a huge thing in Niagara Falls, and that was one of the votes that I think we could have made a difference in the way Niagara Falls moved forward. But now we're just doing the same old thing. The other vote that I thought was a very important vote, and one of the things that I ran on as city councilman, is our payroll costs in the city of Niagara Falls are so much higher than payroll costs in other municipalities our size. Our human resource cost is about 85% of a $100 million budget. When we compare, and when I say human resource, that includes pension costs, healthcare costs, payroll costs. In order to save $350,000, the mayor proposed that our public safety unions would make a concession of giving up their first 6 holidays of the 2021 budget year to save the city $350,000. But Tom Christie, who's a public safety person, let's say you're a police officer, you give up your first 6 days. But what you're allowed to do is those 6 days you're going to put into a bank, and when you retire, you can cash out those 6 days. So now you are making $30 an hour as a 5th-year police officer. When you retire 15 or 20 years from now, those 6 days that were worth $180 are going to be worth $250. You're going to get it at the pay rate you leave. Bottom line is, to save $350, it's going to cost us about $750. So I voted, and also in that agreement was an extension of all the contracts for another year. I voted no, and I made a statement saying, I think we need to come back to the table and look at two things. The contribution of health insurance in the city of Niagara Falls is by far one of the most generous contracts we have for our unions. 60% of our employees pay zero for a health insurance plan that costs the city for a family plan $28,000. Now, if John Spanbauer doesn't want to take that, anyone who was, let me step back, anyone who was hired after 2014 is contributing 15%, but 60% of our employees are contributing zero to a Cadillac insurance plan. And here's what it cost the city. Last year, we spent $20 million in healthcare costs, $10 million for retirees, $10 million for active employees. Out of the $10 million for active employees, we had an employee contribution of $788,000. So the taxpayers are covering a $9 million healthcare cost. That's unheard of in other cities. Okay, so we need to figure that out. And this vote came up about the contracts and said we need to look at workforce rules and the healthcare before we approve any more contracts. So those were the two major, and that was voted down 3-2. Okay, or it was voted for. The contracts passed 3-2. 2 councilmen voted no, 3 voted yes.
Yeah. So those are very important management things that come at you. You can't stop them. They're just coming at you and you have to do management. What about forward-facing proactive stuff? Like with the one thing that I don't know about is that anyone has declared what Niagara Falls is major income or major job. Like, is tourism the number one industry of the Falls? Is Buffalo Avenue manufacturing the major industry of the Falls? If we were to tell somebody what is Niagara Falls, what would we tell them? Is that our number one thing, tourism? Has anyone declared that?
Well, I'm going to answer that with 2 questions. I think tourism is our ticket to make this city better. With industry gone, I think we have to focus on tourism, make it more than a 4 or 5 month program. Make it, when you look at Ellicottville, New York, which used to be a ski town 40 years ago, what have they done to that city? They've turned it around and made a year-round destination. We need to do something like that in Niagara Falls. Now, when you talk about that, easier said than done. I mean, we need to have a huge, this is my own opinion, and people agree with it. We need to have a facility that can host hockey tournaments, a major downtown facility that can, in the winter months, that we could bring people in and have people stay in our hotels. I'm a firm believer that we need some type of an event center in downtown Niagara Falls. We also have, since the Parkway has been removed, I'm not sure if you've been down there. I wasn't sure of the impact what the Parkway was going to have. It is going to be a huge impact. The housing property already off the Parkway removal has gone up. I see people, I drove down there yesterday, people are using that area like crazy, and that could be a great winter trail too. Who knows, maybe we could let snowmobiles go along that, the gorge rim and stuff. So I believe tourists is where we have to look at. Now, no doubt, economic development in regards to jobs is the key. The tourist industry, the numbers I saw, we employ 15,000 people in the tourist industry a year, okay? But that's only for like a 6-month period. Then there's 5,000 to 6,000 people that don't get employed. And what are they doing during that tourist season? So, tourist industry is big, but on a negative side, and I hate saying this, poverty is an industry in Niagara Falls. It's an industry, and we've got to create jobs and do more things to not have poverty as an industry in Niagara Falls.
Well, let me go back to tourism. So if we could, you and I at least say that tourism is the number one industry in Niagara Falls. What we can say it's hard to do, but we should at least say it is, right? It's impossible to do, but we're going to do it because it is. Who's the tourism person in Niagara Falls? If I have a good idea to do anything, or if a small business owner who's doing tourism in the Falls has a good idea, who do they call?
Well, and again, that's a good question, Tom. I think if Tom Christie had an idea that you think is going to be successful in Niagara Falls, you reach out to the closest person you know to city government or even USA Niagara. And I look at this, when you look at the organizations that want to see Niagara Falls succeed, I mean, I think a lot of people, but major organizations, you know, when you look at USA Niagara, you know, when you look at, you know, Empire State Development, okay, the travel and tourism industry, the city council, your leaders, all those people are people that you can go to so they can forward your idea or concept, you know. So I think there's a lot of people, who's ever that person is now, what happens once you get, you know, submit that idea? That's a key thing. It can't sit on John Spanbauer's desk and say, oh, this was a pretty good idea, but we're not going to forward it, you know.
Okay, we've got somebody with a question, but before we go to the person with a question, I just want to follow up on that with, how long do we wait? You mentioned Empire State Development and USA Niagara. We've got 40 or 50 years of these things being here. When do we wait? Tourism opens April 1st. It closes October 1st. We're missing a whole nother year by having these humongous agencies in charge of anything. So where do I throw my passion around of, I need it tomorrow. People need to eat today.
So here's what I'm going to tell you. And I think this is very, as you say that, I don't know if you just saw in the paper recently, that USA Niagara transferred some properties to private developers, 4 pieces of property on Main Street to private developers. I think that's a great move. It's no longer sitting waiting to be developed. Now it's in the hands of a private investors that are going to develop. Okay. The other thing is, on that, we had a Niagara Falls redevelopment meeting the other day, and we actually approved a $50,000 grant for an individual that's going to revitalize and put marketplace apartments and retail store next to Players Lounge. Okay, there's that whole stretch of buildings that have been vacant. That's 6 pieces of property in that downtown corridor that this week people are going to put money into and develop. Now, it's a start. I'm not saying, and we all know, and am I confident those projects are going to work? No, because we've all seen in Niagara Falls very often, projects that have great ambitions don't come to fruition, you know. Well,
all right. We're going to have to talk for days on this topic. But
okay.
Let's go to Edwina, who has a question for you so that I won't become a screaming idiot. Edwina, thanks for tuning in. What's up? Oh, you have
Edwina
to turn
is muted, yeah.
Unmute your microphone. Until she does that, Edwina, there's a microphone button. You have to unmute. John, just before she comes on then, what I wonder is those buildings from Players Lounge all the way to the old Niagara Gazette building have been vacant, you know, for 20 years, really. Whose hands are they in? Are they for sale? Because when I've called a bunch of the for sale signs, they're not for sale.
No. So for example, the properties I'm talking about, and I don't know the exact address, but it's 2 buildings next to Players.
Yes.
Okay. First of all, if you remember, there was going to be a brewery. They were going to, you know, develop a brewery and market rate apartments above 3 of those buildings in there. Okay. That project fell through because the investor or the person that was going to open the brewery, who put a lease in with the owner, pulled out.
Okay, let me interrupt. For all the time that they were going to do that, those properties were off the market. And I think we're talking years.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I agree.
When a guy wants to open up a coffee shop with his buddy and $100, there's no property to do that in. And Niagara Falls is vacant property, but none of the property is available for 2 guys to open a coffee shop.
Tom, I don't disagree. And that's the same thing when you think of Main Street. Okay. All those buildings were owned by an individual for years. Now, again, Blue Cardinal took those buildings over, and supposedly we're going to start developing them. You know, we had that downtown revitalization initiative, the DRI, that bids went out. That's $10 million that Niagara Falls is supposed to get from the state to start that development of Main Street. Now, that's, again, COVID has put a hold on that a little, but I don't disagree with you about people being speculators. And that's what's happened in the city of Niagara Falls. Many people have bought properties and speculate that it's going to turn around, and they keep on waiting and waiting. And we're still waiting for that turnaround.
So let me just go back to the original thing I said, because I don't want to lose track of it. Is there a person with a name that we call for a good idea in tourism that just brings it to everyone else and goes, here, I'm here to fix tourism. What do you got? Is there a guy? Is there a
Well,
person?
when you say it, I would reach out to any public official, and you could reach out to John Percy when you talk about tourism. But if Tom, you had an idea, I think if you call a city leader, I hope that city leader is going to give you the direction or take that initiative to either the mayor or wherever it should go.
Okay, well, let me give you this feedback that when no one's in charge of that idea, then no one really does it. So
Right.
when you can call anybody, you can't call anyone. That's just a business sense. It needs to have somebody's personal fingerprint on it that I'm going to follow up on what you tell me. I hear that frustration feedback. You can have a tourism idea and it just dies because no one's listening. Because everybody's listening. It isn't anybody's job. That's some of what I hear. Right. So the other thing I wanted to talk about while we work out some question issues here is that something I think you will be very open to is creating a job description for what a city council person does. Because earlier I was saying you've been reading the budgets and that kind of stuff. But what does a city council person do? So
if you look at our charter, it describes what we do. Basically, we're a legislative body. The main thing we do is legislation and budget. That's really the main two things we do. And it's funny because sometimes people think we're in charge of economic development. We're not. Okay. Now, will I do anything I can to do help economic development? Yes, but we have a department, an economic development department that's in charge of that. But our main thing, if you look at our city charter, it's not per se a job description, but it outlines our responsibilities to the residents of Niagara Falls. And really it comes down to two things: legislation, and whatever legislation it may be making the city safer. And a perfect example I'll tell you is we have in the city of Niagara Falls, we just passed legislation in regards to delivery business. Okay, so taxi cabs have medallions, they have to get registered, they have to get inspected. One of the big problems we were seeing is the medical transport industry was kind of unregulated, okay? And we said anyone could get in their car, work for a certain company and have a criminal record, maybe not even have a license, and drive medical transports. It's a big business now, We didn't have any regulations for that. So a couple of councilmen, this started before I even got on the council, did some research. It was brought up once before, it got voted down, but this time we did a little more research. We thought it was appropriate legislation and we voted it through. So that's legislation and trying to make the community a better community for the residents that live in it. And, the budget is our main thing. I mean, trying to keep taxes down, looking out for the taxpayer. And I believe sometimes in city government and I'm going to go back 20 years, I'm not sure people in my position were looking out for the taxpayer. What they were looking out for was get reelected, and they were supporting union initiatives versus resident initiatives.
Mm-hmm. So when you ran for city council, when anyone runs for city council in Niagara Falls, you have to run citywide, just as the mayor does. It's kind of prohibitive. What would be the difference? Some cities seem to have districts, so you'd have 5 districts. Is that better idea? Good idea? You've run once. It's got to be difficult to go through the whole city. But
what's funny, Tom? I think it's kind of like, I think there's some merit into having districts. So let's just say the city of Niagara Falls was in 5 districts, and like many cities are like that. And so now John Spanbauer is responsible for this district. Now what I could do is spend my energies more in one district, finding out the concerns of the citizens in that one district versus citywide. Okay. Now, if you were running for office, it's easier to run because you're just looking in that one district. But the other thing is about that is, I think our setup, having council people that are responsible for citywide concerns is okay. But I know some cities, Lockport they have their, aldermen from different districts. And I've never looked at the pluses and minuses of really what it would be, like how that would impact Niagara Falls if it ever went that way,
Mm-hmm. Well, let me go back. I'm getting some questions. I can see questions people are typing in here. They can certainly come in and ask them themselves if they like to, but somebody just brought up what you touched on earlier, that sometimes the city council might have been, better talking than action. And you just said that yourself. How do we change that? Or is it changing, or is it totally different now? Are you saying it's totally different, or, hey, it's still kind of like what we need to do?
Well, when you say talking more than action, my personal belief, let me start off with the administration in the city of Niagara Falls, the current administration. I think Mayor Restaino and the city administration, Tony Restaino, they've been in office for 14 months. They've dealt with one of the most worst pandemics in the city's history. They've dealt with a budget that no other administration has seen before. And I think they've done a great job, and they haven't been able to focus on some of the initiatives we've talked about in their campaign. Okay. But what I have seen this administration do, and anyone who runs a business, and I say they run $100 million business, in the first 12 months, we've got, I should say in the first 14 months, we have 3 new department heads. So they're starting to get their own people in that see their vision. And there's a cultural change in the city of Niagara Falls with, I think, the employees in the workforce. And some people may not like what Mayor Restaino is doing, because I think he's holding people more accountable. And a perfect example is, we just had an article in the Buffalo News about our captains and lieutenants who are required to live in the city in the police department. But the previous administration kind of allowed it to have them live outside the city. This mayor said, hold it, your contract says you have to live in the city. You need to follow the contract. And there's been some discrepancies on that policy or on that rule that's in the contract. But the mayor is holding those people accountable that are living out of the city and should be living in the city. I'm not sure that's always taken place in the city of Niagara Falls, and I think it's great. Okay.
Doesn't the mayor's brother, the city administrator, live outside the district?
And good question, Tom. He does, but he was a city employee back in, I'm not sure the year, I think it was like 98 or something. And he falls under, because he was a city employee in 1998, he fell under a situation that allows him to live out of the city. And that was something. I'm
not saying he's breaking the law, but it is a little bit hypocritical.
Oh, but he's following the rules. He's not breaking any rules. He's following the rules that are in our charter and are in city guidelines. Because that was an issue. We talked about that. That was an issue. And, he's not breaking any policies or anything like that. Now, would I love to see him live in a city? Yeah, but, that's his choice.
Well, I don't care if he lives in the city or not. Residency isn't necessarily a big issue for me, but just because you're technically able to do something, it's not the way you do it. You walk the walk or you don't. You don't say, well, hey, it doesn't have to be me, but it does have to be you. I just don't know. And let me get back to focus. So for the mayor of this city that has this pandemic going on, where tourism might be the #1 industry, was embroiled in the paper. And I don't like the mayor or hate him. I don't care about him. He's indifferent to me. But I see your mayor, who's kind of like the titular head of your society, saying we shouldn't get police blotter information to the newspaper. When we're in the middle of a COVID pandemic, when tourism is zero, when the city budget has gone from 100 million to zero because nobody's spending any money, it seemed not to be the focus of the triage situation that was happening in the city.
And Tom, I think there's a little background that the general public doesn't know behind that. And I didn't know at first. So the first thing I saw, mayor wants to stop giving out police information. There was a reason for that. Some information got out about individuals' identities that shouldn't have got out. Okay. So basically what he said, he goes, let's reevaluate the information we give out. Let's make sure the systems that we have in place are appropriate. Okay. He never wanted to stop totally information getting out about police reports. What he did is he put a hold on it, reevaluated what we do and how we do it, and then it's back. Right now, they're back. So there was a situation that occurred that they need to reevaluate, and they did that, But I think what happened is the way it got out, he wanted to stop all release of police information, and he did temporarily, but it wasn't going to be all the time.
So let me put it back on us saying, okay, we're idiots and we focused on the wrong thing. We did. What is he working on that we don't know about? That's the number one industry for Niagara Falls, that it can't go on another day until I do it. And we didn't pay attention. We followed the stupid police blotter thing. It's on us. We're bad people. What's he doing though to, I don't mean what's he doing? This sounds so controversial. I don't care who the mayor is. I'm just saying, what's the urgent situation? What's the number one problem that we're working on?
Well, I think, Tom, when you say that you don't know about things, so there was many things on Facebook, many things people wrote. Why isn't Niagara Falls going after Amazon? Remember it failed in Grand Island? Guess what? The mayor presented something to Amazon. We had property over next to the golf course that we offered Amazon. So it wasn't like Niagara Falls didn't put something together, and people don't, again, this is one of those things when you say, well, people don't know. And the mayor didn't publicize that because I don't think they wanted that publicized at that point. But it's not like the city sat back and saw Amazon leaving Grand Island and our administration never took an attempt to get Amazon. They actually made an attempt, and they actually offered property. They showed them the site. They told them, here's your benefits. You're a mile from the Niagara Falls Airport. And it didn't fly. But those are some of the things that I think the general public doesn't see. The mayor, one of the things I'll be critical of him in this way, I don't think he toots his horn enough. Like, I think he needs to be out there saying, listen, we just hired a new economic development person from Canandaigua, New York, that did this, did that. He's kind of quiet in regards to some of the things he's doing that are positive things in the city. We just got done with the executive order of 203 when he put the Social Justice Commission together. That was a great commission. You had 5 different subcommittees, and there's going to be a full report coming out in April, but that's going to be something that I think is going to have an impact on the city of Niagara Falls with some of the thoughts and the community leaders coming together. You're in the business. It's your game. You're on the job. How much interaction do you have with not quite the city, but now you go to the state, and you mentioned Amazon, but does it outrage anyone that the stamp plant in Alabama Swamp should be on Buffalo Avenue? That it doesn't make any sense to put $100 million into literally a swamp. I'm not even making that up. When all of Buffalo Avenue is basically vacant and it would cost much less. Plus those 60 jobs are accessible by a bus or you could walk to work in Niagara Falls. Right. Do you sit around as a council and just have a beer and get really pissed off that the state is putting this in the swamp and it should be in Niagara Falls? I mean, taking it personally? Tom, I think when I look at the city of Niagara Falls, and here's the things that as a councilman, I don't know if we were ever considered for that project. But when we look at Buffalo Avenue and some other industrial sites that we have had in the city of Niagara Falls, that I don't know if we'll ever be able to do anything with those sites unless they're cleaned up. Any industry we can get here is something that is needed. And like I said before, I am not an economic development person. I am not going to that stamp plant and saying, hey, why don't you come here? We have people that do that. And I gotta be honest, sometimes we don't know what's going on as a legislative body behind closed doors with development in the city of Niagara Falls.
Do you want development done behind closed doors?
No, but I'm saying there's deals that are probably being worked on that we're not aware of.
Yeah. It's funny how I talk to you is how I talk to you. I don't mean anything accusatorial.
Oh, no, that's good. This is
unconditional love here. I just go, wah.
Yeah.
So, okay. All right. I think Mark has a question. So let's see if somebody has better questions than I do. Mark, go ahead. Mark, you're muted still. There we go.
Hear me now?
We can hear you now.
I'm curious. You mentioned like a conference center or an event center. It sounds like, who would build that? Where would that go?
You know what? There's been a couple sites. First of all, I think NFR would have to work with the city. Okay, there's no doubt they have some prime property that I think a event center could be a great location for. So, when you look at over that area across from the social service building, that area there, when you look at the the sites on Buffalo Avenue that are vacant. I mean, that could be a great area for an event center. I have not seen any plans at all that actually show where an event center go. I know there was a study done in 2014 saying that the Niagara Falls area couldn't support an event center. I'm not sure that's the case, you know.
Well, I was going to say, I mean, that's one of the things I was going to bring up. The county did a study and determined that wasn't going to work. So why would that be a priority at this point?
Well, for me, Mark, I think as long as we are looking at trying to create a tourism base that's bigger and better than we currently have, we need something to bring people in here in October, November, December. So for an example, the hotel rooms in downtown this weekend have a great occupancy rate because there's hockey tournaments at Niagara University and the Hyde Park Ice Rink. Okay. The youth sports right now and travel teams and stuff there's a market out there. There's a market out there for that. Can an event center help that? Yeah, it's got to be the right type of setup. You got to be able to host more than one hockey game in an event center. I mean, you know, you look at Niagara University, would it be possible to have Niagara University come down and play some basketball games? Talk has been about having an AHL team come from Canada, be a home, like Niagara Falls, New York, being a home for an AHL team. Those are all things that I think have the potential. And we look at 2014, and I'm not even sure that's the date of that study. I think it has to be revisited. You know, that was 6 years ago. I think things, there's some positives that happen in this city. And I think we need to relook at that.
So who would pay for it, you think?
Well, I would hope it would be a
Because I find it
combination
interesting, you know, there's a lot of talk, and I'm very familiar with all this about taxpayers and everything like that. And we know Niagara Falls redevelopment's history. I mean, this is a 20+ year sitting on this property. What's the next step? I don't imagine, or I would imagine there's going to be a pretty big public ask or something like that. Is that what you would anticipate?
Well, let's just say it worked out, and I would believe the only way this is going to work is New York State helping us out. I mean, with private development, hopefully. You know, if we had to go back and you look at our casino funds, let's just say we never spent $1 in casino funds. And I'm going to put the number $255 million that I think we've received. Imagine if we never put casino funds into the operating costs of our budget and we had $150 million to play with. Guess what? The city of Niagara Falls could afford it. You know, but we didn't do that. We decided to use casino fund dollars for general operations of the city budget, which there's pros and cons to that. But I would think for an event center to work, it would have to be a combination of many partners in the funding of it. And I believe it's Utica, New York, that the state just built an event center for. So,
well, I talked, you know, I just spoke to a couple of planners from outside the area I mentioned the last time I was on. And they talked about, you know, one of the big drawbacks of downtown Niagara Falls is all these huge buildings that are like really not, you know, the mall building and everything. They're not really conducive to an environment like Main Street, where there's a lot of little places and it's walkable and all that sort of thing. So I just find it interesting, you know, I mean, to me, you know, if you look at like the Parkway area, what the Parkway was removed and Main Street and the potential there, that just seems like maybe the focus would be there, where you're, you know, going to have a walkable place where people, it's inviting to people, you know.
Well, Mark, let me step back, because when I said an event center,
I'm getting the hell off of this.
I'm not sure that's the priority. I think it would be worth looking again, but I agree with you 100%. What I would love to see is 3rd Street, Main Street, Niagara Street, all develop into small businesses, walkable businesses. The state, I talked to Anthony Villardo about a month ago, and you know the state is looking to rehab that Rainbow Center, and they're actually talking about, I don't know if you've seen those plans, they're talking about putting a walkway right through the Rainbow Center with some retail space right underneath, a bowling alley. So there were some ideas about that. So I don't disagree with your thought process there.
John, let me jump on that, because I also had seen a little bit about the Rainbow Mall, and forever we've heard that it's the Berlin Wall because tourists can't get beyond it to the city. Why do you think it takes 4 years at least to discuss blowing the walls out of the first floor and letting people walk through? Why would that take 4 years or more? It hasn't even happened. Somebody's talking about it still. Again, tourism this season begins now, and we haven't. If you put anyone in charge of just opening up that first floor, it could probably happen in a month. Why hasn't it? How come it takes?
Well, I think first of all, because you know, when you have the state entity involved, I think it's a slower process than private.
So why do we have a
entities involved.
state? I just want to get to the urgency. So why have the state involved?
Well, I think first of all, they've tried to develop and they've put money in. And you know what? I've got it. Let me see if I can find this here.
Okay, but this is just blowing the walls out to walk through. Almost everybody agrees that would be good. Why can't it happen this month?
Here's what I'm gonna, so I don't know why it can't happen this month, but I always look at, some people criticize the state about not supporting Niagara Falls enough, or they're taking too much. The state has invested $121 million in downtown Niagara Falls. Okay.
When?
Oh, since 2003.
Oh my God, it's
So
20 years almost.
yeah, 86 million to the state park. Okay.
We don't own that.
No, I said that but they've invested in the
But
state
that's
park.
their own thing. They didn't invest in me. They invested in themselves.
But I also believe an investment in the state park will help Niagara Falls, New York.
Okay, I'm getting real personal about the square footage of Niagara Falls. So that's zero.
Yeah.
Keep that off the table.
But
For me, at least.
when you say why haven't they done it, I think
Yes.
just the state works slow. It works slow. You
Well,
know,
we can't afford slow anymore. You know, the pandemic started a lot of discussions. Amazon and a few other companies were perfectly placed to jump in because the market changed. The market's changed a couple dozen times and we haven't changed. So I don't know that slow can happen anymore. I don't know. When do we say enough's enough with slow? We need it.
Tom, here's what I can tell you. You know, we have a master plan that was developed in 2009,
Yeah.
right? Many of the initiatives have not even started or taken place. And I think there's great initiatives when you talk about the master plan talks about a cultural district, an entertainment, great ideas on paper. Why they have not started? Two reasons why. Financially, no one has come up, stepped to the plate and said, listen, first of all, it's got to be a private public investment in those initiatives. We just have not gotten those initiatives together. And Tom, you always ask the question, and I agree with you. Why can't we be better? Like, why are we still struggling to do something in Niagara Falls? I don't have the answer to that, because you see these, you know, ideas, these concepts, they just don't seem to come through for Niagara Falls. And when they have come through, the ideas we've had, it just seems they fail in Niagara Falls. Do I have the answer for that? No. Look at the splash park that was built whenever that was built. Great concept. Imagine if we put it indoor. You know, we would have been ahead of the curve versus what other cities have done, like Erie, PA. Their splash parks, a huge tourist attraction across the border, huge tourist attractions with their splash parks. We built one, but it didn't succeed, probably because we didn't think about building an indoor one, you know.
How can any of us, my main answer would be, you're in charge now. You weren't in charge in 2003 or 9 or anything. You're the person. And when I took this on, I started my articles with, I'm running for mayor and I need your help. Now I'm not running for mayor. I don't live in your city. But that kind of urgency and personal commitment that it's my problem, it's got my name on it now. What can any of us that want to have that same urgency, and you're now a sitting councilman and you weren't 2 years ago, what can we do to up the urgency? How can we help you? Because you're on our team. You know, how do we help you?
Tom, it's community involvement and it's education. People coming to council meetings and speaking on behalf of what their beliefs are is huge. Okay, we talked about the STR business earlier. That STR business, they had a great lobbying group. They educated people. They talked about the benefits of it. It was a group that was committed to advance their concerns, and he did a great job with it. You know, they made people aware of what their concerns were. Okay, I learned a lot from that group. Okay. They are a group that's very active in helping to try to generate policies and procedures that make that business better. So when we talk about what can be done, I believe Vince Anello has always talked about a taxpayer union for the city of Niagara Falls. I'm a firm believer, and I am going to try to get that going with Vince, that we're going to create a group of people that are a taxpayer union of Niagara Falls that can express the concerns of the taxpayers. And what they can do, have a spokesperson at every council meeting talk about what they want done in this city. Now, can everything be done when these community groups come forward or an individual comes forward? No, but if they're educated and they have a better understanding how city government works, or if they're educated on some of the data that I shared about the cost of city government, then there's more people coming to a city council meeting where we're going to vote on contracts that I think are poor contracts for the taxpayers. We never have anyone speak out about union contracts. Okay, we have union people, but there's never citizens there saying, I'm not sure this is good for the city of Niagara Falls. So community involvement is key. And I'll give you another example. We were at our February 3rd council meeting. There was a couple issues going on in the city, and some people thought we weren't hiring enough minorities. They expressed concerns about it. And someone asked, they said, I would like to have a meeting with city council members. So I reached out to 4 or 5 people that spoke at the city council meeting, and we had a meeting just a week ago. Very constructive meeting. We put some action plans together, and this is the way you start making progress in a city like Niagara Falls, is having community groups that will help provide plans, and then you put action plans together that have to be followed through with, than just saying, oh, you know what, let's go clean up Main Street, but no one puts an action plan together.
Well, okay, let me just go back to the Rainbow Mall. So the city has no say in it. The state owns it, and the state,
Right.
They're going to continue to do whatever they want.
And I don't know what the relationship the mayor has with, the state.
Well,
Right.
but I don't want to have a relationship. I want to have authority. The city doesn't have any authority to fix the mall at all. They don't.
Well, I think the state is our neighbor. And I think
The
if you're
neighbor,
not
they
having-
own it. No, wait a minute. I don't want, neighbor is one thing. The state's controlling that project.
Tom, I agree with you 100% there, but guess what, as a neighbor, if I'm not putting pressure on the state, okay, to say, listen, what's going on? What are we doing? And this is a conversation that I haven't had with the mayor. I don't know what his relationship is with the state in regards to some of the projects in downtown. So as a neighbor, we may not have the rights to develop that priority, but we could have a say, and we could give ideas and suggestions, and also hold the state accountable.
Do you
That's
think we're a
something we
poor-
haven't done.
You think we're just a poor upstate city? I don't mean to put it like that, but struggling with money and all that stuff. Is that about where we are?
Oh, I believe we are. We're a very struggling community in the city of Niagara Falls.
Well, then why don't we ask for all the excess power revenue not to be swept into the state budget, but to be swept into the city budget?
Tom, you asked a question that we've talked, and I forget the name of the group that was started years ago. And I think it was Revitalize Niagara or something that talked about, why don't we get more from the Power Authority? Why don't we get more from the Bridge Commission? Why don't we get more from the state? I don't have the answers of why we don't. Okay. Have I taken any initiatives as a council person so far to look at those entities and say, let's get something from them? No, I haven't. Okay. So is that something maybe that we can do? I don't know how many people have asked those entities to do more for the city of Niagara Falls.
Okay. Do we have any other question? Because we're almost out of time here. But I don't know if anybody else had a different question, because I kind of was hammering on the economic development, because one of the things that I would see as an economist would be that most of the land of the city of Niagara Falls is of that tourism area is owned by someone. It's not owned by anybody. I can't open a brewery in the old Gazette building because somebody controls it. Mostly usually the state. Now that one's a bad example, but between the casino and the park owned by other people, the state owns most of those properties. And in order to do anything, I've got to go through economic development or Empire State Development. Those they don't even have a phone number available for the person to call. You have to call Albany. When does it become, you don't, you just say enough's enough, and not you, but I mean, we say enough's enough and say, I want to sell hot dogs on this vacant piece of property, and you can't. That seems non-American.
And Tom, here's where I'm going to disagree with you. I have Anthony Villardo. I think he's a person that when you just said
His phone
about,
number's not listed. I can't reach him. I can't email him. There's no email for him.
I'll give you his email after the show.
Well, whatever. I'm sure I only hear he's a wonderful human being. But when you deal with the Cuomo state, you can't call anybody but Albany first. And then if they deem you acceptable, they'll pass your information along to the local guy. John, what? This is 2021. You got an idea? You want it implemented in 15 minutes.
Yeah. Let me touch on two things, because I know this is going to come out to taxpayers and people that may be interested. The casino, hopefully that stalemate ends at some time, but the city of Niagara Falls is owed about $48 million in casino funds. And every time I get a chance, I want to make sure the public understands that $48 million, $45 million of it is spent already. So when you see that, oh, the city got their $48 million allotment. Yeah, 45 was, we owe the state back for 3 years of advancements. We owe the other entities that are split. I mean, basically the city gets 73.5% and 26.5% of casinos money has gone to other entities. So we will have about $3 million extra on that. So when residents see that we get $48 million, it's not $48 million. So I think that's important for residents to know. And the American Rescue Plan, I've been out and I've been talking to people. Oh, we're going to get $59 million. That's what's been allocated to the city of Niagara Falls, but we're not getting a check for $59 million. We'll be withdrawing from money that has been put in a pot for Niagara Falls, and we probably won't use the whole 59 million. Okay, we have to basically track all our spending. One thing that's going to be great is we're going to be able to get what we lost in revenues in 2020 due to hurricane sales tax, stuff like that. And we're going to be able to get some of that money from that 59 million. But the 59 million is out there. It's not a check given to Niagara Falls. It's basically, we will be drafting down on that 59 million with any COVID relief, expenses. And there's still details that the Federal Treasury Department has to give us before we know exactly what we can use that 59 million for.
John, I get so heated and passionate. I forget we're, on audience, and I love that you're here answering questions. So thank you so much. We're almost out of time, but the last thing I might touch on is that I spoke with peacemakers earlier this week, because I'm trying to speak with everybody in the city, and fantastic people. Fantastic. Is there a crime problem in Niagara Falls?
Yeah, I mean, without hesitation, we want a safer city.
And what's the are we not spending enough money? Is it?
Well, our police department per capita, we spend as much money on our police department as any other city in New York State.
So why are the outcomes so poor?
I don't have the exact answer for that, but policing isn't only a police problem. I believe it's a community problem, Tom. And I don't have all the answers, but do we have a crime problem? You bet we do. Okay. When you look at some of these areas, and what was it, 21 shootings we had in 2020, that's a problem. Okay. We have a lot of bad individuals in the city of Niagara Falls. Okay. The police department will tell you that the crime is committed by the 1% of bad people. And I believe that, when you have a crime problem, a lot of times it's the same people committing the crimes. Yeah, we have a problem. We have to address it. I'm scared for the community of Niagara Falls. I will not hesitate. And I tell anyone, I'm nervous about the direction we're heading. So do I have the answer to say, well, here's what we need to do to stop this downward fall? No, I don't have the answer, but crime is a problem.
So one of the things that infects my thinking all the time, I filter everything through this, is the Space Shuttle. Remember the Space Shuttle used to fly around? It looked like an airplane.
Right.
And it was delayed. maybe 10 years. They couldn't figure out how to get the panels to stick to the plane when it re-entered the atmosphere. So for a number of years, they just couldn't. And there were high-powered scientists working on this. And they finally said enough's enough. And they flew everybody on a weekend to Houston from all around the country and locked them in a room in a hotel to discuss why the panels weren't sticking. And they did this. And after about 4 months of intense effort together, face to face with no double talk, they solved it. And that's what I'm feeling now with the falls. When we get an issue, be it the Rainbow Mall or be it something different like crime, that we can't get distracted to anything else. We have to sit and say, we have to solve it. We don't have any answers, but we have to solve it. It's one of those unsolvable things that we can't stop talking until it happens, which is what we're doing now. I can't thank you enough, but we do have one more question from Ruth Cooper, who's a block club leader. You probably know Ruth very well.
Yeah, I've met Ruth before.
Yeah. Ruth, are you there?
Well, I'm struggling with the thing. Can you hear me?
We can hear you. You're perfect.
I can hear you, Ruth.
Wonderful. Good morning, John.
Good morning, Ruth. How you doing?
Thanks for inviting me to this. You know, I only caught the last. I've been having some technical issues. So I only caught maybe the last 10 minutes. You know, the New York State Comptroller's office, you know, they do a lot for local governments and, you know, everything from government efficiency reports. How come the council, as a council, you have an opportunity to request an audit of one department, two departments, or the entire city, and not just, you know, for budgetary purposes, because I think the problems that we have in the city are not just budgetary. I think they're, you know, I would dare say that we have, you know, standard operating procedures in some of these departments. You know, especially when it comes to government efficiency. Say, for instance, like our ordinance for clean neighborhoods. You know, how much money of those orange stickers are we collecting? Like nobody is like following through with things, so we know where stuff is. But an audit can bring us up to date. And I believe that was one of the things in the, I think it was 4 or 5 years ago, maybe longer, when Mayor Deister and the council, you weren't on it, with the government restructuring board.
Right.
Financial restructuring board, you know, that just kind of went nowhere. But that was through the state comptroller's office, and you received things like they come in and they say, oh, you know, like for code enforcement, you know, we can do this, this, and this if you follow this, this, and this.
So Ruth, let me tell you something. That's a very good question.
Ruth, thank you very much. We're almost out of time. Let's let John answer. I wish I'd have called you earlier. So thank you.
So in 2015, the city put its own financial advisory board together with local people, and they made recommendations to the city. In 2017, New York State came in and did a comprehensive review of the city of Niagara Falls. And like Ruth said, much of it dealt with finances. One of the things I'm doing as a council person right now, and I'm going to ask our other councilman to take a look at this, I'm going to write down every one of those recommendations between those two documents. Okay, and we're going to evaluate to see what has happened. It hasn't been done before. So for example, our own city financial advisory board talked about leasing out the golf course, the ice rink, and the stadium. That's something the city has done, and it's been beneficial, I believe, for the city. The New York State Comprehensive Review said, you need to do a reassessment in your city. We haven't done that, okay? So, and I believe we need to do a reassessment. So what Ruth talks about is that they actually will provide funding to do a reassessment. In the 2017 comprehensive review, they said there's funding available to help you do a reassessment. We haven't followed through on it. So there's no doubt the controller's office is a resource for this city. And it's one of those things I've been doing is looking at that resource. And we do have to follow up on those recommendations to see what we're at with it.
Hey, John, I can't thank you enough. What, again, can we do? And maybe you could come on again. Would you come on again?
Anytime.
Because sometimes we've strayed now into passionate things, which I really just meant to find the nuts and bolts. Will you come back on regularly. And then
Awesome.
what can we do in the interim to up our game for the better questions and not better, but better discussions in the future?
Tom, I still am a 14-month councilman member, still learning, trying to learn. So I think anyone who comes forward to me and says, hey, listen, I have an idea, I have an issue. I'm not going to say I have the answer, but at least I could start the process of finding an answer. What can people do? Speak their mind, be a voice. I mean, I believe that instead of sitting in a coffee shop saying how much the city sucks, how much this, come to a council meeting, tell it how much it sucks, but give a reason why it sucks and what we can do to make sure we address that issue that you don't like so much. Now, many people are not happy with the way we handle things. And when I say we, the city, but at least we will try to handle them in the best we can. And Tom, if you come to me with a recommendation, suggestion, and I can't come back to you and say, well, Tom, here's what we did. You may not like what we did, but at least we tried something, or we can give you an answer to something you recommended.
Yep. Great. So we're all going to follow that. We're going to have better specific focus all the time on something. But just like the Rainbow Mall, I'll tell you right now, my frustration is the state. It doesn't matter who the state is, it's the state. You can't even change the Rainbow Mall. That seems criminal to me. You can't do your job if you can't do your job. If you have to say, well, it's not for me to do, then we don't understand that. We don't understand. Yeah. How can our city councilman not do it? And you can't, because that's not your call. So anyway.
Well, I know that's a passion of yours, and hopefully 2 years from now, we're saying, look at that Rainbow Mall.
No, it can't go 2 years. It can't go. Anyway, thank you so much, John.
Okay.
Much appreciated. Keep
okay.
up.
Thank you.
Thank you. And we won't be on next week because it's Easter. So we're going to at least observe Easter as a real holiday. Today's Palm Sunday as we're filming this, but we decided to do a show. So we'll be back with our Sunday discussion on civics in 2 weeks, and we'll post a list of guests, upcoming guests at that time. So we're going to end this call. Thanks a lot for watching.